Hello everyone! Today I will be featuring the upcoming Tier 10 Japanese supercruiser, the Yoshino. Basically what the Azuma should have been, perhaps. Before I get into the ship itself, I want to highlight something. Today I am having my 70k follower giveaway on Twitch. I'm gonna be giving away ships, I'm gonna be giving away some really insane VIP cards that basically give you multiple premium ships and doubloons and stuff. And I'm probably gonna be giving away a bunch of those Azure Lane containers because, well, my chat has been begging for them for a long time. So, kind of celebrating my 70k followers on Twitch, right? Probably, if you're watching this vid, I'm probably doing it right now because I'm doing it the same day as I'm posting this vid. Anyway, besides that, moving on to the ship itself. First of all, the health pool, 61.8k. Now, for a cruiser, that would be pretty good, but honestly it's quite low for a tier 10 battle cruiser. Only 3.5k more than the Azuma, and only 1k more than the Alaska. The nose and the stern is 25mm plating, which means you get matched by 380mm guns, example Bismarck, Richelieu, and so forth. The deck and the upper belt, however, is 30mm. Unlike the Azuma that has 25 all over, this thing at least has 30mm deck and upper belt. Now obviously this does not really help you against the likes of Republic, Yamato Musashi, the ships that can overmatch 30mm. It doesn't help you at all against them, but against the rest it does mitigate the damage that you take. It does have the same weakness of the Azuma, which is of course a gigantic IJN citadel, and the deck armor isn't really that special, so don't expect to be shattering too much with it. Oh, sorry, the broadside armor isn't really that special, so don't expect to be shattering too much with it. And of course you're still a big juicy target, so we're gonna angle away. And speak of the devil, a Yamato, we don't want to be tanking his shells. We really don't want to be tanking his shells, because as I mentioned, he can overmatch every part of your ship, so this is not a fight that you would enjoy. And as you can see, the shells that do land obviously penetrate. Concealment wise though, it's not that hard to go dark on the ship. It's got 11.9 kilometer sea spotting, which is not that bad. 8.7 km air, once again, not really the end of the world. Surprisingly, it only has an 11.7 kilometers smoke firing penalty. 11.7, even though the guns are 310. So that's something that I see potential future value in competitive gameplay. But that's something I'll get into later in this commentary. Handling though, the thing is clumsy. Oh my lord, it is clumsy. 920 meter turning circle. Put that into perspective, the Kronstadt has an 840 meter turning circle. On the other hand, with the speed flag though, you do 35.7 knots, which is pretty fast. The rudder is sluggish though. Even with the module, which I kind of feel like you have to use in this thing, the rudder shift is 12 seconds. And Kronstadt is 11.9, but that thing has, as I mentioned, 840 meter turning circle. So imagine the Kronstadt, but even clumsier. And of course the difference is you have a huge citadel and nowhere near the same armor either. Obviously, clumsiness, big turning circle on a ship that has a large and vulnerable citadel is a pretty damn big deal. The belt armor is, or the citadel belt armor is 178mm, so don't really expect to shatter much. It does have a bit of spaced armor with the 25mm torpedo bulge covering the broadside, which surprisingly has actually saved me against the Moyne AP a fair bit, like a bit of French armor going on there. Not to the same extent, of course, you're much more vulnerable, but it did save me at these weird angles. It did significantly mitigate the damage I took. Now, the key point here is obviously the guns that you've been seeing me use here a fair bit. In fact, I'm already racked up about 75k damage using them. The range is 21.3 kilometers, which is very good. The dispersion is 270mm, 202 with the module, with a sigma of 2.05. That's pretty standard battlecruiser sigma right there. Now, the things that set it apart is, of course, the HE damage is very good. 5.1k HE damage, oh, that dispersion. And this is especially valuable, this alpha is especially valuable because once again we have 310mm guns, which means divided by 6, we get 51mm of penetration. And that's why I've seen plenty of like these 10k plus HE volleys, because if you land a lot of shells because of the alpha, you're getting a lot of damage, or because of the pen, you're getting a lot of damage. The fire chance is 27%, once again, pretty damn good. The firing angles Not really that bad either. As you can see, I'm able to angle quite comfortably and kite away and just spam HE at these targets. Shell velocity, 836 meters per second for both the AP and the HE, but as you can see, the shells don't really have too much air drag, and it's pretty easy to land these shells. So, as a kiting HE spammer, very effective. Reload is 20 seconds, 17.6 with the module, which you kind of have to run, in my opinion. I highly recommend it. The downside here is that the turret burst is 36 seconds, and if you run that 3 million reload module, well, Expert Marksman is practically a must-have on this ship. The AP has been fairly niche, in my opinion. I found it inconsistent unless you're presented with really flat broadsides at close ranges. The HE is, in my opinion, the bread and butter of this ship. It has range, shell velocity, fire chance, alpha, and penetration with pretty good dispersion. It all comes together to kind of form, in my opinion, what I would call a super Ibuki. I won't call it a super Zao, because it has too much vulnerability to be compared. The Zao has very trollish armor and you can get away with a lot of sneaky things. Yoshino, not quite that much. Now what you just saw me land are the torpedoes. It can launch 8 per side, 4x4 610mm launchers. Now you generally don't want to be launching both sets of a side if you're spotted, because well, you see how much broadside you have to give, and with this citadel you really don't want to be using the front set if you're spotted. They do 62 knots and have a staggering range of 20 kilometers. And they hit very hard, almost 21k damage each. The downside is obviously that these are the Shimakas at 20 km torps, and they have a spotting range of 2.5 kilometers, meaning the majority of ships will actually easily and without any issues dodge these shells. It might be good against entrenched positions, especially if you can torpedo them from the flank. Stationary battleships can't really move in time if they're sitting nose in somewhere. Or against, in this situation, if the enemy team is pushing your flank. This is basically an optimal Yoshino position in the sense that the enemy is literally pushing towards me. I get to kite away and I get to torpedo backwards. But good players will pretty much always dodge them. 20 km torps don't really have a high hit probability simply because they're so easy to spot. In general, they're more of a zoning tool. It forces the enemy to react to dodge them, and that messes with their positioning, angling, whatever. Close range though, the good torp angles and of course the power of these torpedoes give the Yoshino a lot more brawling power than the Azuma. Because being rushed by a Yoshino is a considerable threat. As well, if you're able to get close enough to actually land these torps, well, you can annihilate any target. So, what are the major issues? Well, the major issue is, well, the Des Moines, I don't really want to fight the Des Moines. When it comes to raw HE DPM battle, the Des Moines, well, I pen him, he pens me. The difference is his DPM is on a completely different level. And if I want to fight him right now, well, I really don't want to be giving broadside to any of these targets back here. Oh, that Montana is, and the Montana is shooting me, and of course you have to be very careful about, well, any sort of long-range AP, you have to be careful about rushing in because of the vulnerable stern. So, you're a clumsy, big, vulnerable cruiser. And even at long ranges, because of your large size, you're pretty easy to hit. Speaking of, let's say, competitive, well, I haven't played competitive in a long while, so take this as my 2 cents, don't read too much into it. Why would anyone use the Yoshino? Well, why would you use it over the Henry? You probably wouldn't. You would probably wouldn't use it in the Henry's role. The Henry has more DPM, it has reload booster, it has decently high HP, it's got really fast move speed, it's much less vulnerable to being citadel, and of course you can do that reverse, you reverse in and you accelerate to dodge shells. You can't really pull that off in the Yoshino. The other role would be, I mean, if you want to run something that can pen 50mm, then the Henry, I think, just does it better while being better at surviving. If you instead want to use it as something to push the flanks and spot, well, then Zao will do a better job since it has better detection and an easier time of dodging. I mean, even Zao has been falling off a fair bit in comp, but if it's used, it's mostly because it outspots the Wooster and the Minotaur. That only have slightly better concealment than it, so it can kind of deal with it. The Yoshino obviously has none of these issues. In trying to replace the Zao, you're trading high AP penetration or range for higher detection. But the problem is, it's so much easier to trap and focus a Yoshino than a Zao. a cruiser or two with something spotting for them, the battleship chiming in, whatever. Basically the very common tactic against large clumsy target. You spot them and you melt them. And there's so little the Yoshino can do about it. Because, well, you have no armor to tank with, you don't dare to give that broadside because of the huge citadel. You can maybe make it work on a flank where it has a lot of support, but it's questionable. Another problem is, of course, that the Yoshino build needs to run fire prevention because of the increased fire duration, which means you can't run RPF plus concealment expert, something which the Zhao can run without any issues. The one's role, you don't want to replace something like a Stalingrad in a central position because, well, you don't have that super AP. And you don't have the tankiness to be able to sit nose in. You can't really sit and contest caps either because you lack radar. So you can't really replace any of those roles. The one potential that I maybe can see is replacing Moskva for smoke firing long range comps. The fact that it only has 11.7 km smoke firing penalty means that with the gearing to smoke it up, the Yoshino can provide a lot of firepower across the map. The Moskva has, I think, a 12.7 km smoke firing penalty. So, and of course you see the HE alpha plus the fire chance. This thing is very, very good at spamming HE accurately at long range with great penetration. So, obviously nowhere near as tanky as the Moskva, lacking radar, but in conjunction with smoke, I could maybe see it edge into that role, potentially. Now, obviously, this is just speculation on its potential use. Some ships find very niche roles. We'll see what the clans will make of the ship, how they will make it work. There might be that possibility. We will see. Overall, though, I think it's a fun ship. Perhaps more suited for random battles than competitive. It's hilarious when the torps work out. But on the flip side, against good players with solid aim, the combination of clumsiness, large size, large citadel, and weak armor can be pretty rough to deal with. And, you know, there are some situations which are just really, really rough, especially when it comes to dealing with DDs, especially something like the Harugumo or Kitakaze, you know, ships that can pen 32mm. Having a Harugumo smoke up somewhere in front of you and start spamming you, he just melts you. And if you're spotted, you can't really turn out either because of the large citadel. Basically, we get into the situation that the Yoshino gets trapped a lot easier than other cruisers because of these set vulnerabilities. However, if you play it safe, you play it at range like I've been doing it here, you don't really put yourself in a position where you can be trapped, where you can be focused down, and you're basically just able to shoot. That's all I've been doing for the last game. You can rack up a significant amount of damage, and you can be quite hard to deal with because, well, you have an easy time landing shells across the map, and of course the Montana, well, Montana has 38mm plating at best, so you pen every part of his ship. So, Yoshino the Super Azuma, it's absolutely a better Azuma. It's much better at range, because it has that slight armor increase, which means that you don't get automatically blapped by every battleship that shoots at you. You can actually bounce and angle against a lot of them and greatly mitigate their damage. It also has greatly improved brawling power because of the torpedoes. YOLOing a battleship in the Azuma is kind of like just asking to be blapped. If the battleship doesn't give you a perfect broadside so you can citadel him, and you really need to get close to do that, you kind of don't get anything done in the Azuma. In the Yoshino, on the other hand, you're rushing someone, they need to be very afraid. If you manage to ambush them, those torps are no joke. So, easily spotted torps perhaps, but still very, very hard hitting, and a source of close range alpha damage that the Azuma just lacks, that the Azuma really needs. I actually think the Yoshino is in a pretty good spot. Now, I actually mentioned this later on. I'm going to show you guys the port after this. I'm going to show you the armor model and what kind of build I'm running on it. But I mentioned it after this. And the one change I would perhaps want to see is turret traverse. I think if you want to make this kind of agile torpedo spamming cruiser or super cruiser, the turret traverse could be better. Especially lately when we have been seeing what kind of turret traverse wargaming could potentially add to the game. I mean, the Soviet battleship turret traverse is certainly an interesting thing, an interesting aspect. What else can we cover on the ship? The AA, well, we're actually about to, the carrier might be coming for us soon. That's probably something to highlight. Just like with the Azuma, the AA is pretty lackluster. It's decent at covering yourself, but honestly, don't expect tier 10 carriers to care too much about it. In the current meta, well, the Azuma actually fits pretty okay into the current meta because it has excellent range. So it doesn't really care too much. Oh, sorry, the Yoshino, because it doesn't really care about being spotted. Some ships suffer greatly from being spotted. The Yoshino in general can sit at such range, and you kind of want to be shooting all the time anyway, that being carrier spotted isn't that big of a deal. On the other hand, Hakuryu AP bombers, no big deal hitting it. Other bombers, no big deal hitting it either, because, well, it's a very large ship. And we see rocket planes come in. I have my sector set to my left side. We're gonna pop defensive AA. And he dodges my flank, which means we have to rely on the continuous DPS. And as you can see, the continuous DPS doesn't really do that much. And because of your lack of armor, rocket and size, rocket planes deal a consistent high amount of damage to you. He comes in from the other side. I've disabled the sector so that my defensive AA can boost my right side as much as it wants. And he comes in again. And his planes, now he recalls his planes. I'm shooting down the planes after they've finished their strike. That's kind of the story of the Azuma. Don't expect to be able to defend yourself if a tier 10 carrier decides to wreck you. You're no Wooster, you're no Minotaur, you're a pretty easy target. However, grouped up with someone else, and considering your range, it's pretty easy to stay grouped up with other ships. You can play around the current meta quite comfortably, in fact. Looking at the score, 248k damage. Certainly not a bad game. Only one Citadel. In general, I don't think you're gonna get that many Citadels in the Yoshino. It's absolutely more of an HE spammer than a Citadel monster like something like the Stalingrad or Alaska. The HE is kind of where your strengths lie. 2 torpedo hits, don't expect too many per game. As I mentioned, pretty easy to dodge. 4 planes shut down only after he actually finished his strike. The impact kind of non-existent. Team score wise, only 2.2k. We farmed a lot of battleships more than anything because, well, that's what the Yoshino does very, very well. It farms big clumsy targets with the great pen and high fire chance. Once again, for IJN cruiser players, hardly an uncommon experience. Detailed report, 107 HE shells, hit 26 AP. 2 torps hit, you can see the alpha on the torps, of course, even when we hit battleships. And we actually got a wither worth of fire damage. Plus a bit of flooding on top. And of course, the synergy is there with the torps, though. If you manage to land a torpedo and get a flooding, and then you follow it up with that HE, there's a lot of synergy there with the long-range torps and the long-range guns. So, as a design, I think the Yoshino works. How much we needed a long-range kiting stifling cruiser, how much we needed another one of those in the game can be absolutely debated, but I think as a concept the Yoshino is a working cruiser. Damage taken, well, you can see of course the AP. When you get hit by AP, generally you tend to take a fair bit of damage. We managed to mitigate most of it. We didn't eat any silly citadels, and well, overall, a pretty decent game. Looking at the targets we shot at, besides the Des Moines, just a lot of battleship farming. And that's kind of how the Yoshino works. You can catch, of course, DDs off guard. If someone spots a DD, these guns are nasty. Very fast, good accuracy, huge HE alpha. A DD being caught close range by a Yoshino and spotted is not having a good time. That's very obvious, I would assume. But in general, most of your games will be spent firing on the battleships because, well, you don't really have any tools to spot the other targets yourself. You have to rely on your team to do it. Anyway, let me show you guys actually my modified port and the armor model of this ship. First of all, since, well, I have no doubts that people will ask me about it, this port is the modified Azure Lane port. One of my fans, one of my viewers, made a modified version of it for me. And it's going to be added into the Aslan's mod pack in case you guys want it, because, well, every time people see it on stream they ask about it, so I assume now that you guys have seen it on YouTube, you're also going to be asking about it. It even has a custom container ship as well. Anyway, moving on to the Yoshino itself. I did promise you guys I would show you guys the armor, and here you go. Even though it looks like it's different armor plates, it's all 25, 25, 25, so obviously 380mm guns will overmatch it. Same thing with the stern, with the exception of a small plate covering the rudder at the back. The deck and upper belt is 30mm, so once again very vulnerable to HE spam, and Republic and Yamato, Musashi, so forth obviously overmatch it without any issues whatsoever. And on a ship as big as this, being overmatched is not a fun experience. The Citadel is huge. The Citadel is huge. We can see the waterline. The waterline basically, where the Citadel armor belt is 178mm, that's above the waterline. So it gives you an idea of just how much Citadel we're dealing with here. And yeah, being caught full broadside in this thing is a very, very easy Citadel to hit for pretty much every single ship in the game. And even nose in, if you're rushing something because of the overmatch, the flat 195mm armor isn't really enough to prevent you from being Citadel. So a lot of weaknesses when it comes to survivability, simply because armor is thin, Citadel is large. Build-wise, what I've been running on the ship so far has been turret survival, some additional tankiness, the improved dispersion because, well, the guns are so important. Improved rudder shift because, as I mentioned, the rudder shift really isn't that good. It's 12 seconds with the module, and with a 920-meter turning circle, that's a pretty rough experience. Concealment expert, although in the age of carriers one can question just how valuable it is, but 8.7 km air spotting isn't maybe the end of the world. And of course faster reload, but if you do run faster reload like I do, then you kind of have to run expert marksman to at least get the main battery traverse down to 35.6 seconds. Captain wise, I've been running priority target, AR, superintendent, concealment expert, and fire prevention. Fire prevention is of course pretty much a must-have on these large cruisers because they burn so very well compared to normal cruisers. Turret traverse, I mentioned how important it is. Expert marksman because you really don't want to wait 17.6 seconds to switch ammo type if you get a juicy target. And with the last 2 points I've gone jack of all trades for faster consumable usage. Potentially you could maybe run high alert as well. This has been, well, honestly pretty much a battleship, a Yamato build that I've been running. So in that sense this captain probably fits pretty damn well for people looking to retrain or just like grind using their Yamato captain, because it fits extremely well. It uses very, very similar builds, so a lot of value there. Although Yoshino is a pretty fun ship, and I think it's actually in a pretty good state. I don't really mind ships that can be punished quite easily. I'm not sure if the firepower the Yoshino has is quite enough to offset that. I would maybe like to see some of the clumsiness. One of my major pet peeves with the Yoshino is actually that the turret traverse is so damn sluggish. And the reason why this is annoying is because, well, you have these meme torps. You have these 20 km torps, which encourage you to switch sides so you can use torps on both sides. The problem is every time you switch sides to use your torps, well, you have to wait ages for your turrets to catch up because of the very, very slow turret traverse. Maybe buff the turret traverse a bit. I don't think it would change the way the Yoshino plays in any way, and I don't think it would have too big of a balance impact, but it would make playing the ship a whole lot more enjoyable since you don't always have to sit around waiting for the turrets to catch up. Anyway, that was my take on the Yoshino. Make of it what you will. I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary, and I will talk to you guys later.